Now then, so we're going to look back on the weekend's Heineken Champions Cup semi-finals. We have Ruaidhri O'Connor here in studio from the Irish Independent, and we have Matt Williams. You're there, Matt?
I'm Joe. Rory, good to see you.
Hey, Joe. Or Matt.
Good to have you with us. We'll come on to the rugby in a moment, but in many respects, the lingering image seems to be a Munster fan. All he was missing was the Brown Thomas bag, as Ronan O'Gara said this morning, attired very genteelly. And then Billy Vunipola, I suppose, is the other lingering image from the weekend. You were at the Ricoh Arena, Rory. I haven't spoken to anyone who was there.
Yeah.
Certainly on television, you could hear the boos. What was the general atmosphere like?
It wasn't great. The place was half full, which was the first impression that you got when you got there. And I knew before the game it was going to be like that. They hadn't sold as many tickets as they wanted to. There's issues with trains and all sorts of things. It was Easter weekend. And then when you got there, the kind of once it came through the press box and kind of got settled, they started reading the teams out, as they do with all sporting events, and there was a big roar for Billy Vunipola's name from the Saracens crowd, and it just grated a bit. And then once he started kind of playing, the Munster fans were booing him, for probably, because he has been in the news. You can't obviously interpret a boo. You can't interpret whether everyone was making a point on homophobia, but he was certainly the kind of villain of the piece. And
quite a few LGBT flags I saw.
There was, I didn't notice until the end of the game, which I was quite impressed with those people for the foresight of bringing them, and that's a nice way of making your point. But there was Munster fans who didn't cover themselves in glory, not just your man who ran on the pitch. There was people gesturing. There was, reports of fairly foul language being directed at not just Vunipola, other fans, drink taking, all that sort of stuff. But you can't really excuse it. We kind of rugby crowds got a really good name, but there was, fairly. I've seen stuff being shouted from the crowd. My colleagues have heard it. But Vunipola also engaged in it a bit when he scored his try. He walked back to the halfway line, whipping up the crowd, gesturing at the crowd. And if you were booing him because of something he did in the game, you'd kind of absolve him. But there's this sense that it's him against the world now, and that he's on this journey of vindication. And obviously the BT coverage has been heavily criticised for their role in kind of this redemption story. And there's no redemption in what he said. And his performance at the weekend, while excellent and part of a brilliant team performance by a brilliant team, to me in no way redeems his views or his stance. And given the chance twice to either apologise or to clarify, he doubled down on his views. So I know Billy Keenan, my paper, has called for him to be banned from the tournament. I'm not sure how you do that, but certainly his employers appear to have backed him. He said he felt a lot of love from the dressing room. The Saracens fans rallied around them in the kind of the way fans do. And that's, is this the Saracens' cause now as they go towards the final? This us against the world because our player, is Billy Vunipola the victim here? I don't think so. So it just left, and then I didn't see the fan on the pitch at the time. I head down doing a bit of work, but the pictures spoke volumes. I don't know what he was at. Ironically, if Billy Vunipola had decked him, he probably would have got a longer ban than he's going to get for his fairly reprehensible views. But we don't know if this guy's making a stand against homophobia, or is he just a guy who's annoyed at what Vunipola did in the game. It was all pretty nasty, and kind of Sunday in the Aviva Stadium was refreshing because it was just a lovely game of rugby in front of a nice crowd, and there was just none of the nastiness of the day before. And Vunipola kind of brought that to the party, and Saracens brought that to the party by picking him. It was. I won't forget it in a hurry, and and not for the right reasons.
No, I'm sure. So our BT colleagues were 10 metres down the touchline from us on the Sunday, and so I am conscious that Matt and I piling into BT or defending BT just comes with that extra layer, The BT coverage has been heavily criticised. Nick Mullins, for instance, in his commentary in the moment suggested that all Vunipola had done was like the Israel Folau post. He didn't necessarily mention Vunipola's own post, which is worth mentioning, I think, if you're talking to a TV audience who aren't fully au fait with the whole story. And they talked a lot about this difficult week that he'd had, and he was able to smile again. And it probably has been a difficult week for Vunipola because his views are out of kilter with the vast majority of society. There's probably been a level of indoctrination here, family, friends, from the day he's been born. Everybody he's trusted has told him this is right. This is how we interpret the Bible. This is what we think. Sarah Elgin, in fairness, did put it to him that this was largely of his own making. He didn't take the opportunity to apologise in any great way. And there has been, on his part, I think, and it's really struck me on Saturday, lack of engagement, like a genuine lack of engagement with the fact that he has upset people, how offensive and unpalatable palatable it is to lots of people. There was no sense from him that I get that this is really, really offensive to a huge number of people watching in. And then his body language that you mentioned, you mentioned the body language in front of the Munster fans. There were LGBT flags waving. There was no sense of him making amends or peace in his body language, which might have really helped the situation. There was no sense of going over and kind of saying, look, I kind of get it, or a gesture, or applaud back, or something. Well, whereas it was provocative. It was almost vindication.
Yeah.
Like, look, I'd put you in your place now, haven't you? And that's actually left a bad taste. And I've gone from the point of view of thinking, maybe the warning was okay last week and a formal warning is relatively serious, to now thinking, well, in Israel Folau's case a year ago, maybe he could argue I'm a bit taken aback by the reaction to my comments. But Vunipola now, both last year with Folau's case and again with this year in Folau's case, has seen up front, this offends people. This is out of kilter with how the vast majority of people are living their lives. You need to be cognizant of that. He's ignored all of that and waded right through. I'm now thinking the RFU and Saracens have a big case to answer here. Like Ronan O'Gara made the point this morning on OTB AM, if it was Chris Ashton, hey, maybe there would have been a game or two ban. But when it's Billy Vunipola, well, pragmatism seems to win out. Matt, where are you in all this?
Gee, it was a good game of rugby yesterday.
Yeah.
Mate, look, I'm appalled at their comments. I'm appalled that we're still having to talk about it. And I really mean that. I just find it so frustrating that on one of the best rugby weekends of the year, we're still talking about these two fools tweeting. Look, and you just got to say, Joe, to add on to your part, that these guys don't come from a highly educated background. And I don't mean that in any derogatory way, but these guys are, they haven't got university degrees in divinity. They're coming out and saying things that we all find offensive and are not part of the rugby community. They're not part of what I have played in, coached and been part of all my life. And I know there's so many people like that. It's just so frustrating and sad that we're still having to talk about it. Look, I just want it to go away, and if that means they go away with it, that's fine. I just think people also have to, it's not football. Rugby guys don't go to crowds and take their shirt off and they've got a big sign underneath, and they don't do that. And the Polynesian culture is a warrior culture. And we have to be aware of where these guys come from with it. It doesn't excuse anyway what they've done or what they've said or all that. But
sure.
I'm just, I've really had a gutful of it. I've had a gutful of talking about it. I've had a gutful of the reaction, and even the reaction in the papers yesterday, like going, guys, can we talk about rugby? And this is just overshadowing everything. And whatever makes it go away quicker and we stop offending huge sections of our community and we just get back to talking about what was a wonderful day. As I agree with Rory, it was just a smashing day of rugby there yesterday. Where we were, Joe, as you know, we were constantly walking up and down through the crowd because we were broadcasting from the ground, from the surface, and we had to keep walking up. And I was saying to Shane Hawkins afterwards, I just really enjoyed the day. The people were so kind and generous. There was a group of juniors there, Lansdowne under 11 kids, and they were talking to us. It was people just having banter, and it was fun. There was smiles. It was, and the rugby was great. It was just a really good day. And we're talking about, and we actually mentioned, we're just talking about all the good things about the game, and not this little terrible sideshow.
Yeah, it's probably a luxury we don't quite have today, given the scale of this story. Is there any sense, Rory, that Saracens or the RFU now, like ironically, the storm after the BT coverage has almost heightened everything again, and maybe Vunipola's interaction with the crowd? And I take Matt's point, we're all products of our environment, and that is an aspect of the story.
While Israel Folau, I've read profiles of him, and I think he did come from a very difficult background. That's not the case with Billy Vunipola. He went to Harrow, one of the best schools in the UK. He's quite an articulate man. When he was speaking to Sarah Elgin on BT, he articulated, he was well able to talk. Someone yesterday described him to me as an intelligent guy, maybe a little bit easily led, but I wouldn't remove his agency. I mean, he is intelligent, and he's been given enough time to kind of to clarify his views, to repent if he wanted to, but he was talking to BBC. He said, I was quite a motivating factor that people were booing me. I wanted to back up my words and show my teammates that I did not mean to distract them. He felt that he was playing for his views and his religious views. That's my interpretation of that quote. Maybe I'm taking him up wrong.
Yeah.
And it's going to dominate the build-up to the final. And I want to talk about rugby. You want to talk about rugby. And Matt clearly wants to talk about rugby as well. But there will be Leinster fans who will bring flags to the stadium. I'm sure there will be boos. There'll be boos when Saracens play. It's either Exeter or someone else this weekend. That this is going to follow him around because he's brought this on himself, and because Saracens and the RFU have dealt with it. Like, what was the nature of the warning? What constitutes a second offence? Because BT gave him an opportunity to clarify. He didn't. He said, "I believe what I believe in."
Yeah.
And then the BBC gave him that opportunity, and he said, "I was basically playing for my views." So this is going to follow him around, and it's going to ruin the joy of the next couple of what should be the game, the era-defining game of Europe of the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Is in 3 weeks' time. And that's what, in a normal weekend, Matt's right, that's what we should be talking about, and it deserves to be talked about at length. But one of the main protagonists has made what are, in my opinion, quite dangerous comments, and he's backed them up and has refused to back down on them, and he's been kind of made into a bit of a hero by a couple of UK media outlets, including BT, and that doesn't, I don't think, sit well with anyone.
Gareth Thomas, by the way, was on Channel 4's magazine programme on Sunday morning from the Aviva Stadium. Naturally, he was asked about it.
Gareth, this is a huge story, a personal story for you. It's taken rugby off the back pages to the front pages for all the wrong reasons. Israel Folau, we know his views. He's said that things like this before. He's got previous. Did you think that Billy's latest reply was an acceptable response?
Unbelievably unacceptable. And to say that he means things with kindness and love, as an openly gay man myself, I don't feel kindness and love from him agreeing with somebody that I should go to hell. So I think for him to then apologise and the club make a statement is a very easy thing to say sorry. It's very difficult to mean it. So for me, I feel it's a rugby-driven thing, it's a club-driven thing. Billy, even though he's not defending his own words, his beliefs in them words haven't changed, even though he's made an apology. So for me, nothing really has changed in Billy Vunipola's views.
See, on Thomas, Gareth Thomas is obviously a legend and an amazing man. Even just a couple of months ago, he undertook restorative justice with a teenager who assaulted him in Cardiff. However, there he said his beliefs haven't changed. Billy's beliefs haven't changed. Like, unfortunately, that's not the end point here. It's not a standard we can impose on Vunipola. In a free society, he can't be expected to abandon his religious belief system. So for rugby, for Saracens, it's how you manage that deeply contentious tension. And that is tricky. And Matt, I think as we begin to park this and move on to the rugby, which we will, rugby Saracens are going to have to reach a point with, Folau's gone, but with Vunipola, where he's told in no uncertain terms, this is massively offensive. You have a platform, you have to respect that platform, and your contract is such that you just can't be putting this out into the general atmosphere because it's outrageously offensive to too many people. That is not a difficult concept, Billy. Do you get that? I mean, that's kind of the very straightforward conversation that has to happen here.
Oh, without doubt, mate. Look, again, these guys are just wrong. Like, there's no defending them. To hear Gareth speak there and, to hear the passion in his voice and, it's you can't defend these guys in any way. The point is, what is the sanction and how does that fit in legally within their contractual basis?
Yeah.
And this is not, this is the problem in our world. You're on Instagram you have like, and you don't like. On Twitter you have 200 and something characters. This is a complex area for the clubs to enforce some form of view on a player, and it is not easy. Now, when you sign a contract, there's a thing there. There's, in all our contracts, there's bringing the game into disrepute, and that could be in a lot of different ways. Now, does this fall into that? And it's complex for the clubs because having a religious view that portrays what we've heard from them, which we all find it horrid, But how does the club legally put that on the player? Now, there's lots of talk back in Australia saying that Folau was warned, it was in his contract. But I've also been told by some very senior sources in Australia that he does not have that in his contract.
Yeah, no, the chief executive of Rugby Australia has confirmed it's not in his contract. Now, she did say though they had some minuted meetings with Folau where they specifically said in this area, Israel.
Absolutely.
No repeat scenario. So there's that option, I suppose.
Joe, I'm not disagreeing with any of that.
Yeah.
And again, for everyone there, I am not supporting these guys.
No, that's clear. We know.
I detest what they say. I detest what they say. You know, there's a great old mate of mine who I played rugby with, and he couldn't tell us he was gay for years and years and years because he didn't feel that environment was safe. You know, and that's a horrible, horrible thing to have said. And no one should be told they're going to hell. No one should have any of this done to them. And these guys are wrong. My point is, it's just not from a legal point of view. And I've worked as an employer.
Yeah,
you can't just throw this at people. You have to go through a very rigorous and quite difficult process. Because in Australia, what will happen with Folau? He'll hit him up for his full contract for $5 million. And they don't have $5 million to pay him.
Yeah.
Now with Vunipola, I don't know his contractual status and where that goes to, but there's a process that goes on. Let me make one other point in amongst all this. The person that jumped the fence and confronted Vunipola, he was equally wrong. There is no way we can. And I saw some places in the media trying to say, Vunipola, he's a big man. What was he scared of? When you go onto a rugby field, you go into a sporting venue. As part of a team, you're incredibly vulnerable. And no one should be able to jump a fence and threaten an athlete, even if you don't like what they said. So it's not, there's two wrongs don't make a right here, you know? And you know, I've been at grounds, I've had things thrown at me, we've all been at grounds with things done at us, you know, and it's, we've got to protect those people. There is no way that can be justified, no matter what Vunipola said. So there's a whole lot of issues here that we're dealing with. And it is nuanced and it is complex. We all must take the point of view that we totally oppose what is being said. But as far as sanctions towards these guys, within our legal system, it is complex. It is not black and white.
Yeah, it's a very fair point to make. Munster 16, Saracens 32. Rory, you were there, I think Matt and I watching on TV. I mean, right from the off, it was just the most perfect opening for Saracens. There were two brilliant box kicks, Ben Spencer with those, and I think it was Strettle each time. I don't even know, is he trying to catch them? It looks like he's not. He's just getting up and trying to knock them back. Austin Healy made the point on one of them that, you know, Sweetenham was really slow getting back to give Mike Haley a dig out, and maybe that was emblematic of a certain flatness in Munster's feet, but there was just a quality about Saracens right from the off. It was almost like kicking game first half and then more in hand second half. Owen Farrell sort of said that at half time, it seems, but right from moment one, Saracens just had control of this game.
Yeah, and Munster brought the physicality that they needed to bring, but because Haley was so suspect under the high ball, and Saracens had clearly seen that from the off, and they said they'll test him early. So as soon as Chris Farrell rushed up and made a big hit, as he did a couple of times in that first half, as soon as Jack O'Donoghue monstered someone, as was kind of what we all kind of hoped that Munster would bring to the table, which they maybe hadn't brought to the table a year ago, they won a couple of big defensive collisions, but Saracens knew they had another way to go, so they just put it up in the air and put Haley under pressure. And it's funny, Rob Kearney was talking about Toulouse were spoiling in the air yesterday as well. It wasn't they were going up to catch it, they were going up to try and slap it back, which is much easier to do as the offensive side, because it's a much smaller risk. Haley didn't have that luxury, and once he got beaten the first time, it was going to be a difficult day for him, and it proved to be. I mean, he missed the tackle in the try, made a couple of really good tackles, he took the wrong up in the try. He made a couple of good last-ditch tackles at different points, but unfortunately he was the weakness in the Munster armour, and Saracens being Saracens and being as good as they are and as ruthless as they are, they just went after him all day. And
I feel like that's harsh on him in a way, because it was a thankless task, and the quality kicks were good. I mean, fellas chasing the ball were good, and you know, when they cut to Jerry Flannery in the stands, he's often, by the way, the best pundit in any game.
Excellent, yeah.
When they go to Jerry Flannery, so Jerry Flannery made the point, Matt, on these high balls, because they went to him in the first half. He said, one, like, they're kicking under no pressure, So, I mean, it's easy to put a good kick in when it's under no pressure. And he said, too, our escort lines aren't very good. So the runners are, we saw what England did to Irish escort runners, if that's the phrase we're using these days, at the Aviva Stadium. That, the likes of Strettle were having a free run at Haley. No one was getting in his way. And it all combined to leave Haley hanging out to dry a little bit.
Yeah, it does. And, they've got Saracens have a very simple formula, and they've been using it for years. They practice, if you watch them warm up and practice before the games, they do so much of a kick, chase, catching the ball. So off a box kick, they'll warm up with their wingers and centres running through, leaping and catching the ball. And they practice it and practice it and then practice it and have done it for years. And it gets them out of their half, and it's highly effective. Look, I think you've got to say a couple of other things here. Munster's away form, again, has caught them. They have, in the pool stages, 1 win, 1 draw, 1 loss. So they're exactly at 50%. And then they go to across the Saracens, which was always going to be a tough day for them. Always, I felt, was beyond them. And they obviously didn't come away with the biscuits there again. So it's their away form that they have to do something with. And while the kicking game was poor, once again, it was their defence. In the first half, they held and they held and they held, but then they let in some pretty soft stuff there towards the end of the game. And to add to that, they just didn't have a plan B on how to break down Saracens. What else can we do to score some points against Saracens? And in the end, their only try came from a turnover on a scrum where the ball popped out or was disrupted at the number 8's feet and they moved across. So long term, Munster really have some pretty deep thinking to do. They'll make the semis or thereabouts again every year because their home ground is just a fortress. But they've got to really go away and rethink and replan and recruit on how they're going to beat one of these big 4 teams in a semi-final. And if they can't get their away form in the pool stages right, it's always going to be on the road. And until they can wet their away form right so that that's at home, I think they're going to keep struggling and not have success.
Well, they can't go to the market either, I mean, that's what, they look like they're missing 1 or 2 players, but they're not losing anyone this summer, which is a good thing. They lost Ryan 2 years ago, they lost Ebo last season. So at least they're going to get back with what they have. Their young players will be a year older, albeit so will their older players, and it's a World Cup year next season. But I think there's a number of things they need to work on, as Matt said, and their attacking decision making, I think, is key, because when they can hammer everyone in the Pro 14, bar Leinster, maybe 1 or 2 others, on a weekly basis, and they look really good when they do it. They're kind of the Saracens of the Pro 14 at times, but then they come up against the real deal and they run into brick walls. And there was one, I think against Saracens, it's quite clear that the scoreboard is not your friend usually. They use that against you, and once they get a little bit of breathing space, they just squeeze and let you make mistakes. And there was one point when the game was still quite close, when Darren Sweetenham got a bit of space and he had men outside him and he tucked and ran when he should have drawn and given. And it's just that the decision making, like Haley, you don't want to hang someone out to dry, but you don't get those opportunities against Saracens very often. In these games, you just don't get those opportunities at all. And like Leinster have shown, I think this is why Leinster will give Saracens a much better game, because when Gary Ringos or when James Lowe gets the ball in that position, he'll take a better decision. And that's where Munster still, we have this conversation every year now, it feels like, and they're probably going to play Leinster in the Pro 14 semi-final in the RDS a week after Leinster playing the European Cup final. So we'll see if they've made a little bit of progress in terms of results at that point. But if they lose that game, suddenly they're going in as 2nd or 3rd seeds to next year's European Cup. They'll end up in a tough pool just after World Cup, and we'll just be here again. And it's an achievement to get to the top 4. They've done very well to get there with the squad that they have. They were unlucky to lose Earls and Carberry, but they won't make those excuses for themselves. Although there was kind of a resigned feeling in the stadium that wasn't there last year. Last year they were just barely able to speak. This year it was almost like they knew from early on. They'd come to terms with the defeat much earlier than they had a year ago. I think they knew they needed to be perfect, and even stuff like Conor Murray's box kicking was a little bit off. They needed their big players to have the game of their lives, and they had a good game, but it's just not good enough against Saracens.
It felt kind of incredible after 36 minutes when they got back to 9 points apiece.
Yeah,
I mean, it was like
then O'Mahony gives away a silly penalty.
Well, yeah,
and that's that's meat and drink to Saracens.
Yeah.
You've got to just see it out to 9-all half time and then start the second half well. Amani gives away the penalty and they don't start. It's game over.
Matt, you always talk about the championship minutes. I mean, Saracens came out in the second half. It was interesting. Alex Sanderson said that Owen Farrell said, we've kicked a lot in that first half. Let's try put the ball through the hand. And from minutes 40 to about 52, 53, Saracens had 86% possession. And they went from 12-9 up to 25-9 up. Game over. Thanks very much. You know, JJ Hanrahan came on and got Munster going a little bit at times. But they are a phenomenal side, Saracens, when they're in full flow like that. They come onto the ball at such speed.
Yeah, they're the form side of the competition at this stage of the year. It was the pace of their ruck ball. And Joe, it's exactly what you said. They hit the ball at such pace and they therefore get the gain line. And the tackles on them are not offensive tackles. They're tackles that might be effective tackles, as Munster did in the first half. But they get to place the ball quickly and that ball is moved so quickly that the defensive line is always struggling to reset. And I felt the halftime score really flattered Munster. There was no doubt about their effort. There was no doubt about their determination to try and tackle. And they did tackle. But Saracens probably left 2 or 3 try-scoring opportunities on the field in that first half. But you just had that feeling at half-time that Munster were holding on rather than boxing very clever. And again, as Rory said, you know, Peter Money giving away that penalty was really, I felt, a massive turning point in the game just before half-time. Mate, the one other thing I would add is you know, Felix Jones, if he's in charge of their offence, you know, something that should happen is Felix needs to get on a plane, go down to New Zealand, Australia, visit the super teams, go to the rugby league teams down there and try and upskill himself to come up with some plan Bs.
See, he's talked about in glowing terms. I wonder how much of a head he's been given.
It's funny, Matt, like, he did that last summer. That's what he did with his off-season last summer. Himself and Jerry Flannery went down and they spent time. I do think Van Gran runs an awful lot of the attack.
Yeah. That was his speciality before, was it?
He's kind of a bit of everything. He's been a forwards coach with the Springboks, but I think he does take quite a lot of the attack on himself. His point afterwards was, we do need to improve our attack, but we need to have the ball first, and we didn't have the ball for pretty much the whole game. But he's right. Matt's right. Their attack in these games, you know, Cast when they struggled at home, like Gloucester was good, but the Exeter game, they're just not able to break free because their attack is not as, they're not able to play heads up. I don't think, you know, they're not able to see the space when the few times in these tight games that it's on.
Do they have the skill set? Do those players have the skills set to play that kind of game?
They do. And
are they working on the right things in training?
They probably are. They're probably doing all the right things in training, but you know, it's easy against the Ospreys when they send over a dummy team, or you know, it's when the space is cut off in this way. Yeah. They just don't seem to have it, and you know, it will be a major frustration, I think, of all Munster fans that their attack, even when they look good. Yeah. They look good when they're not under pressure. When they're under pressure, they usually win the game with their heart and with their upfront effort, and that's not good enough to beat Leinster, Saracens, Racing, really. So I mean, I do think a lot of it falls on Jones. Matt's right, and another summer down there wouldn't do him any harm. But and having Carberry and Earls again, you know, they're two of their best attackers as well. They would help.
Yeah. If I give you an example, guys, Leinster spent a whole lot of Saturday doing something different. They were getting the midfield and coming back short side, getting the midfield, coming back short side. When they got around the 22-metre mark, they'd play a 5-man line out and they'd hit their centre, hit their forwards in midfield. Now, that's something that they have in their resume, but they don't play every week. They brought it out for that game. Munster's attack was predictable. It's what they've done before. Now, if you do that against a real quality coaching outfit like Saracens have, Mark McCall and his staff, they'll analyse you off the park. And that's exactly what happened. And it's what happened to Toulouse. Toulouse also didn't bring anything that was exceptional to that game. And Leinster analysed them off the park. When you're at that last few games of Europe, you know, you've got to have some different cards to play besides the tour clubs.
Yeah, the clock's really coming against me, and I want to touch on Leinster for obvious reasons, but it is worth just again remarking in the fact that there were just over 16,000 at a semi-final game. I think it's the lowest since 2001 for a Heineken Champions Cup semi-final. There were certainly well over 30,000 for the 08 fixture, the same fixture. I don't think there were trains up from London. then again, it's an hour and a half in the car. Like, Saracens have a small fan base, but there is like a nagging sense they need to be careful. This tournament has been messed about in some respects. The change of names several times over, the format. I think the splitting of the TV rights between Sky and BT was a massive failure. I think that damaged the thing badly. And there was a bulletproof momentum about the Heineken Cup. It was on Sky Sports, and it had a history, and it's just, I don't know. I thought that was very worrying. Like, Ron O'Gara today said, she's like Super Rugby, you know, and no sport is immune. You can't just keep messing and tinkering, and you feel like there's more messing and tinkering ahead, and you end up like Leinster are going to fill out Dublin, of course, sunny day, and they didn't even fill it. But it's kind of embarrassing for the sport, if you're being honest.
Well, it's embarrassing for EPCR. I think they were sold as this all singing, all dancing, going to revolutionise the whole thing and take this product, which, as you say, didn't look that broken, but make it something completely different. You know, and it's become almost a problem child for the three old, to use a John Laneyism, the three owners of it. You know, it's kind of fallen between stools. It doesn't seem to have any momentum behind it. The people there who work in it are working hard. The promotion is good. The access to players over the build up, you're given loads to try and sell it on, and they can't keep relying on Munster fans going away as well. You know, a couple of years ago they had on all English semi-finals in the City Ground, and the crowds were terrible. If Munster had been beaten in the quarter-final by Edinburgh, how many people would have been in Coventry then? I know Edinburgh would have sent a few down, but it was it is worrying, and it's like there are issues, I think, around ticket pricing. EPCR take over the semi-finals, so it's not the clubs who set the prices. So Leinster can do deals and do kind of power hours for the Aviva, a tenner tickets for between 9 and 10 on a certain day, and that gets a good tranche of tickets in. EPCR, I don't think there was any kids tickets, kids prices as such for the games over the weekend. Easter's not a great weekend, that's a scheduling issue. Maybe that's the English and French saying, no, we let them have Easter, we'll have the better weekends. They'll have Saracens, will have a game in Wembley, but that takes months to build up to it, and they'll get a good crowd at that. The semi-finals are difficult, and talking to the staff at EPCR over the weekend, they have looked at stuff like putting it on in a destination over the course of one weekend. They have looked at ways of improving it, but there is definitely a big concern. Although if that game had been in France, it would have been a massive crowd. If it had been in Ireland, it would have been a massive crowd. It's England is really the problem, and even talking to colleagues in the English print media, they struggle to get club rugby into their papers. English club rugby, for all that it's driving the agenda, just doesn't really have a place in English sport right now, and it's reflected in the strongest team with no support.
Okay, fair point.
Yeah.
Our rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone, team of us, everyone in. Matt, with the clock against us, sum up Leinster 30 to lose 12.
Not perfect. Leinster, that is, not perfect, but much improved. They're big-name players from the Irish camp that have not been playing well, especially Johnny Sexton, did play well. Dev Toner at the line-out time was back to calling the shots. Shawnee O'Brien had one of his best games. Henshaw at 12. He's one of the best inside centres in the world, one of the worst 15s. He's a fantastic...
He's most certainly not one of the worst 15s in the world. I think there's plenty ahead of him in the queue.
Well, mate, I'll tell you what, which fullback does he put out?
Oh, wow. Okay, fair point.
Even with Israel Folau put out, he wouldn't get to Australia at 15. He'd get in at 12. It was just anyway, that's another crazy decision. Ringrose was great. James Logue, perfect selection on the wing. Rob Kearney was nice and solid. The team played well. And they've got a lot more gears to go up. To lose for the second time on arrival in Dublin were poor. Didn't fire a shot. Got their selection absolutely wrong. Their kicking game was appalling. Every single line-out they threw to 2. Every single line-out of the game they threw to 2 in the line-out. They had no belief in themselves. I think Shane Horgan said yesterday, a great line, that we had more belief in them than they had in themselves. So, look, job done for Leinster. Lovely crowd, beautiful day. All the good things we like talking about were there. Lots of good banter. Not a bit of bad mouthing from anyone in the crowd. The Toulouse supporters were singing right to the end. It was a really good day of rugby, and Leinster will go across to the final with great support, but they'll go as underdogs, and they are. I think Saracens are in form and are the better team, but in a final, anything's possible. And I certainly hope this Leinster side will get better over the next few weeks. I think Leo will give that side a run again. He'll give that, and I think they need another run. He's going to have to balance that out with rest. But, Johnny Sexton definitely needs another game. Shawnee needs another game. Henshaw, Dev, they'll be better for that game and for maybe one more before final time.
Yeah. This is going to be just such an epic final. And there probably is a sense of, right, let's see who the best team is here. They've kind of wanted... I know they played at the quarterfinal stages last year. Saracens weren't in brilliant form, certainly not compared to now. There is a sense that this settles the last 4, 5, 6 years.
Yeah, and Johnny Sexton made the point repeatedly after the game that he was surprised by how much Saracens have bigged up that quarter-final, and Saracens basically responded to that quarter-final by bouncing back to win the English Premiership, and they've been unbeaten in this tournament, and they've been the most impressive team. You're right, like I used the phrase era-defining earlier, and I think that really is what it is. It's Toulon had their 3 years in the sun, but apart from that, these are the two teams who've dominated this tournament for the last kind of 8 or 9 years. Saracens were a long time coming. They've earned their right to be where they are. But Leinster, I think, will play at a pace and with a system. With an intensity that they don't play, that Saracens don't come up against very often, and will ask them questions that no one else really can. That 13th minute try, the first try of the game, the low try, it was just perfect. I just thought, like, the game, Matt's right, 80 minutes wasn't perfect.
Losers started well, by the way, in the
Losers
first
started great,
yeah.
And all those questions that we had about Leinster's form and the players that that hadn't been playing well, they lived on for about 10 minutes and then just it clicked into gear, and it was just sensational rugby. I thought it was brilliant, and just to see Sean O'Brien throw the passing, the offload. I mean, Rob Kearney said during the Six Nations, when you're looking for form, it sometimes just takes one thing coming off, and it looked like O'Brien, just the weight lifted off his shoulders and suddenly he was back, and Sexton was just, again, not quite not quite there, but he was almost there, and that's all you need with Johnny Sexton. Low, made himself undroppable. So did Scott Fardy. You felt a bit for Jamison Gibson Park.
Yeah.
No, it was really impressive, and I think I think it's a scratch game. I read that somewhere. As it stands, obviously no teams or injury news or anything like that. Yeah, I would agree with Matt. I think the form and even the England-Ireland game and the ramifications out of that favour Saracens right now, but Leinster will give it an almighty go and will take Saracens to places they haven't been, and if they can get ahead and force Saracens to chase it, they'll be in a great place. And a new stadium, or sorry, a new venue for the final in Newcastle makes it a bit more interesting as well. And in that regard, EPCR should be praised for taking it to new places. I think it's a really exciting final, and
absolutely.
For the rugby's going to be great.
Yeah, no, it should be just fantastic, because Leo Cullen said kind of undercooked for the Ulster game, and they were dealing with the fallout from the Six Nations, and then they emerged on Sunday and took a massive step forward, you feel, and the key players back to form. I guess, Matt, it comes down to how big a step can they take forward again between now and the final, in terms of continuity and individuals getting more fitness and sharpness, and like they could pitch up at the final, and you suspect they will, and have jumped on another 10-20%. They'll probably need to.
They will need to. The final will come down, as all finals, to the team that makes the least mistakes will win. And I think what Leinster can do very well that teams haven't done to Saracens so far is give Saracens something they don't want. Give them a game they don't want to play. Now, Saracens have been good enough, and Rory's point is very salient, because their last two fixtures against Glasgow, they won by 50, that was in the Heineken Cup, and they dominated Munster, so the opposition couldn't impose themselves on Saracens. They couldn't impose themselves on the game. Leinster, I think, will get an opportunity to do that. They won't be completely starved like these other teams have been. And it's when they get their chance to give Saracens something that they don't like, a style of rugby they don't like, slow down the ruck, attack their line out, attack their set play, get their backfield sorted out so that the kicking game of Saracens is counteracted, not like Munster, we saw from Munster. If they can give Saracens a bit of grief and rattle their cage, they've got a show, because no one's rattled their cage before. But they'll need everything to go their way and to have a day where they don't make those mistakes. And a mistake means, like we saw yesterday, the restart from Toulouse that went dead, the kick charge down. From both those errors, Leinster scored tries, game over, for want of a better take. Yeah. And then you put in, as Rory said, just a glorious phase of rugby to lead up to James Lowe's try, and they were in a different league. But that's not going to be the case. for the final. But it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful game of rugby. And guys, I really hope we can talk about rugby and not these two morons again.
No, I know. I shared the feeling, I must say. By the way, you keep saying yesterday. How's that jet lag back to France? Are you all right?
Sorry, mate. I'm a day out. I keep thinking it's Monday and it's Tuesday.
No.
I had travel. It took me 12 hours to get home. I'm a day out. My apologies to everyone. It's Tuesday.
Definitely Tuesday, yeah. Friday's just around the corner. Right, listen, we'll let you go. Thanks a mil.
Pleasure, guys. Nice
Cheers,
to talk to you.
Matt Williams there. Rory O'Connor, the Irish Independent as well. Thank you.
Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team.